Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq, with daily insight on the Nasdaq-100 Index, or the NDX, which is made up of 100 of the largest domestic and international non-financial innovative companies listed right here on the Nasdaq stock market. The NDX has been the barometer for U.S. large cap growth and also one of the best performing indexes over the last decade and a half, not to mention one of the most liquid index ecosystems in the world. Joining me this Wednesday afternoon, we have Ryan McCormack, QQQ Equity ETF Strategist at Invesco, to discuss weekly trends in the Nasdaq-100. We'll also take a look at Moderna and Tesla. Ryan, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks, and let's start with an overview on the Nasdaq-100.
Yeah, thanks, Jill, and it's great to be here. I think some interesting news in Moderna and Tesla this week, which we'll get into, but it just kind of speaks to the differentiated nature of the index. And I think for one of these examples, we won't be able to talk about the differentiation for too much longer. But that being said, for the week, QQQ up just over 3%, outpacing the S&P 500 up 1.85% for the week, and the S&P 500 value up just around 1.5%. Year to date, we've extended that year to date relative outperformance against the S&P 500 up over 38% relative to the S&P, up around 13.5, good for roughly 24.5% percentage points, of outperformance.
And if we take a look, a deeper dive into the index, let's look at some of the sectors that are driving that performance.
Yeah, so it's going back to the story of the overweights, right? The differentiation between the sectors that we hold, and it's tech, discretionary, communication services, that were the biggest contributors to performance. I always like to point to consumer discretionary because they are, in terms of differentiation and just the dynamics of that underlying sector, it does look very different than the S&P 500. Names like Tesla, like Pinduoduo, like JD.com, like Mercado Libre, like Lululemon, all had solid weeks of performance, up over 5%, and are not held in the S&P 500. So, those three sectors really driving that relative outperformance for the week.
And let's talk about Moderna, some fantastic vaccination results.
Yeah, so you look at Moderna and very solid efficacy for their vaccine. Obviously, a lot of optimism around it. You have the FDA that has announced that they're going to be meeting December 8th through the 10th. Now, obviously, they're not saying what they're discussing, but writing on the wall is certainly Moderna and Pfizer's vaccine. I think there's some interesting differentiators between the two, right? Moderna maybe a little bit better in terms of cold storage relative to Pfizer's, but at the end of the day, the read-through is optimism around a potential COVID-19 treatment, which should hopefully be coming sooner than later. But Moderna not held in the S&P 500 year to date through about 10 minutes ago, up 357% year to date, added to the Nasdaq-100 in July of this year.
And let's wrap up with Tesla. Of course, the big news this week is the addition into the S&P 500.
Yeah, so this is just a year-to-date price performance chart of Tesla, and it's something that we've talked about, right? I mean, I think you look at the performance in August, and you'll see that pop towards the end of the summer. There's a lot of speculation that it was going to be included in the S&P for September, but it looks like we just had to wait another quarter. Should be effective on December 21st. It'll be interesting, the dynamics behind it. There's talk about polling investors and adding the shares in tranches. But when you look at the underlying results, 5 consecutive quarters of positive earnings. The writing was on the wall that it would be added. For the year, the stock is up, again, as of 10 minutes ago, 481%. It's been in the Nasdaq-100 for a number of years, and looks like we only have about a month left where we can talk about it as a differentiated holding within the index.
All right, Ryan, appreciate the update. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks.
Thanks, Jill.
You got it. And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.